Hey guys, this is Sam with sneakinshow.com. Today we have another modern series for you, and we're going to look at blue, white, red, or Raka, the archetype. And it's a control deck. We've all seen it. We've all seen blue, white, red control before. But there are a number of different ways you can take this deck strategically, a number of different ways that you can build this deck. And I've had a lot of questions about it recently, and I wanted to just have a look at it, have a look at all these different directions, and give you guys a little bit more information on how to build the deck so that when comes the time to put it together, you have all the information. What we're looking at right now is the deck that a trio of people worked on for GP Brisbane last year. That trio of people was myself, Paddy, and Daniel Unwin, and we took it to quite reasonable finishes. Daniel, in the end, audibled into Jund and came second, so we were very happy with his finish, despite the fact he didn't end up playing this deck. But Paddy lost his winning in the last round, obviously finishing in the top 16, finishing quite well. I finished in the money, despite having a really awful day two. And yeah, I was very happy with the deck at the time. It was really well placed. So this was obviously pre-Death Right banning. So when we look at this deck, keep that in mind. It's from a different era. But yeah, if there was a reason that people think I know anything about the deck, this would be it. And let's just have a look at some of the common cards in it. So we got Cryptic Commands, we got Electrolyzers, we got Lightning Bolts, we got Snapcaster Mages, and we got a Mana Leak or Path to Exile Spell Snare. So what we're doing here is we've just got a bunch of cards that are 2-for-1s, right? So Lightning Bolt's a 1-for-1, Lightning Helix is a 1-for-1, Electrolyzer is commonly a 2-for-1, or at least draws you a card. So it's reasonably free except for the mana cost. And Cryptic Commander is the biggest 2-for-1 ever printed. So what we're trying to do with this deck, and this is the basic strategy of all the blue, white, red shells, is we're trying to trade cards with our opponent, and then trying to grind card advantage until we to a point that we're the ones with cards and they're the ones that don't have cards, and then we just win with whatever the hell we have. So our win condition here is literally anything that does damage. Quite commonly Celestial Colonnade because he's the last man standing, but other times it can be Vendilion Clique, Blade Splicer, Snapcaster, just whatever. Whatever will do. And once we've got more cards than our opponent, we have a very good chance of locking them out of the game in a reasonably unfair way. It's not uncommon for you to be attacking while your opponent has zero creatures on board, 0 cards in hand, and you've got 5 cards in hand. At that point, the game's all locked up, you're in complete control, and you just take over. This list actually ended up getting used by Shaheen Sarani, I believe, at a GP a couple of weeks after. He just took our deck list and ran with it. I think he finished in the top 16. I think he finished like 11th or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so this deck was quite well placed at the time, but the age of this deck is over. Blade Splicer, very good when fair decks are most of the format, and if anyone remembers, the best 3 decks in the format were this deck, Jund, and Birthing Pod at the time. Birthing Pod was fighting on a very fair axis, as it normally does. It's always threatening the combo, but it's a reasonably fair deck most of the time, and Jund is incredibly fair, the fairest deck ever. So now the format's more Splinter Twin and stuff like that. And Affinity is, as always good, but it's quite fast. So we're trying to beat a different sort of deck now. So I wouldn't recommend that anyone plays this, but just for a little bit of evidence about, where I'm coming from, I thought I would show you guys this one first. So let's have a look at something that I don't actually think is blue, white, red, and that's blue, white, red twin. So let's just power by convert mana cost. So this is the blue, white, red twin deck, and whilst this is a blue, white, and red deck, I feel like this is where the umbrella ends. This is no longer a blue, white, red control deck. This is a combo deck using the same cards, or using a similar suite of cards. So you've still got Celestial Colonnade, and you've got stuff like Restoration Angel that can win in a fair way, but this is really a hybrid combo deck. We're trying to win through this, and this, and this, and whilst there are fair routes to victory with this deck, mainly you're going to get to the game to a point where you're going to try and combo off at some point. So this, to me, is not a blue-white-red control deck, and whilst there are versions which are starting to come out now, which only run a couple of Kiki Jikis and then Restoration Angels and forgo the Deceiver Exarchs and Splinter Twins, which I do think are blue-white-red control decks, this is pretty much the wheelhouse of anyone who knows Splinter Twin backwards and forwards and every which way. So go ask them about it. I don't know this deck well enough to give you any advice on it, and yeah, that's about it. So let's look at something that is a different, like a bit of a weird take on it, which is the Geist Blue White Red deck. All right. So what this deck is trying to do, and this is one of the more aggressive ways that you can take this deck, is it's trying to kill people with the Geistus Entrapped. And it's not exclusively Geistus Entrapped, obviously, you're only running 3 of them, but as soon as you include this card in your deck list, it starts to look a bit different. You start running things like Repeal, you want Restoration Angel to help guys survive combat. You start running more Path to Exiles because Kitchen Finks becomes a bigger problem for you. And one of the other things you're doing as well is that you're running Remands instead of Mana Leaks in this deck. So the reason that you start running Remand in your deck instead of Mana Leak is for a few reasons. First of all, they're very similar cards in that they cost 2 and they counter something. Remand is not a permanent counter because the card goes back to their hand. You draw a card. Mana Leak, however, trades for a card most of the time, but gets a lot worse in long games. The reason that you'd run Remand over Mana Leak because you would like to trade card for card with your opponent in these sort of archetypes most of the time, but sometimes it's better for you to see more cards than it is, and buy back tempo. So see more cards and buy back tempo. They both buy you a bit of tempo, but Remand's a bit better at it. And you just want to see more burn spells. You want to see more of your threats. You want to see more cryptic commands, and that's what you want to do. You want to cycle through your deck. You want to get there with Geistus Entrapped plus a bit of burn. And if you get a hit in with this, that's 6 damage. And then maybe you get a second hit in with just the Angel token, lose your Geist. You've done 10 damage already. At that point, it's really easy to burn your opponent out, especially because they've probably done 3 or more damage to themselves because we're playing Modern. And you only need 2 or 3 extra spells at that point. And that's why you would run Remand, because you just need to trade cards with them, or trade tempo with them for a little while you're getting some damage in with your Geist, and then you want to see more of your deck, and you want to draw more cards, and you want to Lightning Bolt them a bunch of times, and then you win. So the reason that this deck is bad, or the occasions in which this deck is bad, is when Geistus Entrapped gets blocked a lot. It's obviously not well positioned as a card against Birthing Pod because they have, a bevy of ground blockers. There's no way that this guy is not getting blocked in that matchup. He's basically a ball lightning there. That being said, he's not the worst because you get 4 damage in and then trade for at least half a body. But if you're trading this card for like half a Kitchen Finks and then they gain 2 life when it comes back, it's a really bad deal for you. So there is a reason that whilst Geistus Entrapped is powerful, this deck doesn't really show up quite as much as the other archetypes. It's really good when control's good, right? So if you can resolve a Geistus Entrapped against other people playing blue, white, red, then you're all gravy. Like, you're going to win that game. There was a time which was about it was like coming up on mid last year where Blue White Red was really popular. It had shown up in large numbers to the Players Championship. It won the Players Championship, and that was the perfect time to bust out Geistus Entrapped. I remember playing a GPT in Adelaide actually, where I busted out 4 Geistus Entrapped, and I think I played Splinter Twin once and Blue White Red 3 times through the tournament, and it was just great. It just won me infinite games just for free because I could resolve it on turn 3 and just kill my opponent without them being able to interact with it at all. Hexproof obviously is a bit of a nuts ability on something that does 6 damage a turn. So yeah, this deck is something always to keep in mind. I don't feel like it's particularly well placed right now with Affinity, Birthing Pod, and Splinter Twin being the best 3 decks. Splinter Twin can win through it, which is an issue because whilst it's a great clock, they are faster than that. So having to tap out on 3 is never fun. You'd really like to be on the play if you're going to tap out on 3. and playing it later is always a bit of an issue as well. So it's a bit problematic there. Against Birthing Pod, this card's never really that good, and Birthing Pod never really goes away either. But then again, you do need a clock against them. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world, it's just not particularly well positioned. And then against Affinity, it's pretty good because you actually need to get a clock on them really quickly, and you need to close out those games before they just draw back into some more gas. But yeah, your Affinity matchup's typically quite good anyway, so I wouldn't really stress about that. But yeah, because Blue White Red isn't around quite as much, I wouldn't be playing this version of it. Let's move on though. Let's move on to Flash Blue White Red, which is the version that tries never to tap its mana during its own turn. Okay, so the differences in this deck are you're running Think Twices and you're running Sphinx's Revelations. So what we're doing in this deck is we're basically trying to fight a fair game for most of it. We're trying to trade resources with our opponent as always, and then we're trying to obviously, Shadow of Doubt's a fairly unfair way to do it if you can get it to work, but basically this is a cantrip, more cantrips, more card draw, more card draw, more card draw. Once we've got a bunch more cards than our opponent, we try and win in a really non-interactive way, which is that they either have no cards in play at all, no cards in hand, no permanents on board, and then you just try and kill them with a colonnade, or you try and resolve a large Sphinx's Revelation. Now this card, obviously we've seen a lot of it in Standard, but in Standard it's a really tap-out control card in that you try and draw into some Supreme Verdicts, sweep the board, resolve an Elspeth, resolve a Jace, try and win that way. In this deck, it's a very different beast. In this deck, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to a point where you draw this on, I don't know, let's say turn 10, turn 11, your Sphinx's Rev for 7 or 8, draw a whole new hand, untap your mana, and then Lightning Bolt the hell out of them. So you're just going to Lightning Bolt them 4 times, and then win the game that way. Obviously, this is just a card that's really hard to interact with for most of the decks in the format. You need a counterspell to stop it, and while Splinter Twin has that, and they can stop it, the other decks really can't. So if you're already in the control of the game, this is just one of the most non-interactive ways to beat the majority of decks in Modern. Obviously, it falls short in counterspell against counterspell decks, but you can get into counter wars with them and then have this as your sole surviving card or whatever, or they can tap out at a bad time, and then you can draw a new hand, and that'll just win you the game as well. Obviously, a very high quality card. I personally do not like playing Sphinx's Rev in Modern that much. I find it a little clunky. I really like Think Twice a lot. I think Think Twice is really good in this deck, and I think Sphinx's Rev could really just be anything. I think this could actually be like equally replaceable with White Sun Zenith. I don't know if anyone remembers that card, but it's triple white and X instant, and you put X 2/2 cat creatures into play. So if you're resolving an X spell for where X is 7 or 8, that's just going to kill them in a turn anyway. And it reshuffles into your deck. It can be used as emergency blockers. At that point, you probably don't need the life. Like the life gain on this card, it's really good, but it's not the same as it is in Standard, where someone will have a board of 5 power or whatever, and then you can just Sphinx's Rev once a turn for 5 turns, 5 turns, 4 turns, let's say, or however many turns you need to get away from that, and you stay at a life parity, you draw a bunch of cards, you answer their threats, the game's over that way. Because this card is realistically a 7 or 8 mana cost card, you can't afford to play that many of them. And because of that, it ends up working differently, and you really just need only a couple, because resolving them for 5 mana in Modern is a death sentence. That's like the most expensive divination ever. You did nothing on your turn. You spent 5 mana Sphinx's Revving for 2 cards, and who knows, maybe they're both lands, and you just lose to the Tarmogoyf that's on board. So this is a very good deck. This is a very good way to play the game. I wouldn't deny it of anyone, but it's not my wheelhouse personally. The other card that's normally in this deck that is absent from this list is Ajani Vengeant. So this deck will never tap out except for Ajani Vengeant, which I don't understand really. I honestly don't think that card's good enough to tap out for if your game plan is not to tap out. But the card's very powerful, and people really do like it to get a little bit of advantage and then to lock up the game after removing a creature or something like that. And yeah, so if you were to look at this deck, should maybe consider Ajani. I'm a little biased against him, but it's not really my thing. Cool. So yeah, this is what the more traditional list is. Obviously, you could be playing Restoration Angel as well. I want to move on again and talk about a deck which is more of a hybrid. It's got some combo elements to it. It's got some fair elements to it, and that is Kiki Control. Um, and this is a deck that's shown up in the last couple of weeks, and it aims to combine some Restoration Angels and some Kiki Jikis to go infinite, maybe Sphinxes rev out, and yeah, get some value from things like Wall of Omens and rebuying Snapcasters off your Restoration Angels. This is a synergy deck in a large part, and it's very similar to the blue-white-red Splinter Twin deck, but we're not actually running Splinter Twin here. Splinter Twin is a little too deep for us. We're still a blue-white-red control deck at heart. Even though we're down to one cryptic command, we've still got 4 lightning bolts, we've still got the 4 mana leaks and a couple of remands. This is a large counter suite, obviously making up for the fact that we don't have as many cryptics. We're down on Snapcaster Mages, but we've still got the full complement of Electrolyzers, and we can, surprise block people with Restoration Angels here, as well as Sphinx's Rev on occasion. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to leverage the synergies that Restoration Angel has. Basically, this is the build-around card in this deck, right? So we're trying to Kiki Jiki plus Restoration Angel, we're trying to Restoration Angel a Wall of Omens or a Snapcaster Mage, and we're trying to Kiki Jiki a Wall of Omens or a Restoration Angel to win the game. It's worth noting that a Kiki Jiki plus a Snapcaster Mage late in the game is almost always game anyway. If you've got a large graveyard, being able to rebuy your Snapcaster Mage every turn and bolt them, or just control their board, or just counter everything they do for the rest of the game while drawing cards, is just going to kill anyone anyway. So Kiki Jiki really does have quite a lot of targets in here. He's got a full 10 cards to target. Obviously, Kiki Jiki plus Wall of Omens isn't game over, but it is pretty close, drawing that extra card every turn. Yeah, so we've got just sort of that compromising list here, and I think it's going to be pretty popular. I think most people will end up dropping a Kiki Jiki out of it. I know I have, and I think that people are going to start dropping a Wall of Omens as well. Wall of Omens, whilst good with Restoration Angel, isn't a really good reason to play the deck, and it's not a really good card right now anyway. So this guy can block, Kitchen Finks or what have you, but the issue with it against the Birthing Pod deck is that if they have a Birthing Pod, you don't want to be paying 2 mana for a 0/4, because they're going to beat you anyway. That's not going to answer it. It doesn't answer the issue. If they don't have the Birthing Pod, you're really favored anyway because you're on blue-white-red. So blue-white-red is already like an insane matchup against Birthing Pod when they don't have one in play. And when they do have one in play, Wall of Omens is terrible. So it doesn't really get you anywhere. It lets you draw cards, sure, it lets you cycle, and it makes your Restoration Angels slightly better. But does that mean it needs to be included? I don't think it does. Obviously, a lot of people, are going to compromise and play a couple still because of the synergy, because it blocks things from the Jund deck quite well. Like this is really good, a really good card when people are playing a lot of treetop villages and stuff like that. But they're just not really around at the moment, and to my mind, I would rather have another 2 Snapcaster Mages than these 2 Wall of Omens, and I'd rather have even Lightning Helix or more Cryptic Commands or just whatever than the other 2. Which it's a synergistic card, but I don't think it is in here on its own merits, and I don't think Restoration Angel makes it good enough to play, because Restoration Angel can be played without Wall of Omens. You don't need to play Wall of Omens in your deck to play Restoration Angel. The other weird thing about this deck is that we're playing Desolate Lighthouse here. Obviously a very strong card, obviously a card that Splinter Twin has been playing for quite a while. I would definitely recommend playing one. The first one is really free. Obviously you have to give up a tech edge for it because you can't afford that many non-colored sources in your deck. But yeah, the card's very strong and really enables your combo win condition. So where I am when it comes to blue-white-red at the moment is I'm playing a Kiki control deck, but my version of it. And let's have a look at it now, just so we can have a bit of a chat. And I've named it Kinkiki Trolljiki, just, because that makes a lot of sense to me for some reason. And yeah, here we are. So what we have here is we have basically what is a blue-white-red flash deck. And instead of the Giant Vengeance, we're running Kiki-Jikis, right? We're not running Sphinx's Revelation because I think that card's awful. But we're trying to get there in a combo or a fair way. It's worth talking about how often we combo off in this deck, and it's not that often. We have a combo win condition, but we're normally winning in a really fair way. And I'm starting to have a look at this deck and having a think about how much we actually need these Kiki-Jikis in here. They're never going to be Sphinx's Revs. I'm not going to take them out and put another bomb in. If I take them out, I'm putting some more fair cards in, maybe an extra couple of Lightning Helixes, so we're just like shoring up our pod matchup. We've already got 4 parts XRs, which is worth having a look at because I would actually be playing maybe a 5th bit of creature removal if I could. So maybe these become mana leaks, so I can counter creatures instead. That's only because of how good the Deceiver Exarch deck is at the moment, and how often it shows up. And it's showing up a lot, and it is quite good. So, yeah, we're just trying to fight a really fair game with this deck, and we have a combo option, which is the 2 Kiki-Jikis. So, as I mentioned before, Kiki-Jiki plus Restoration Angel obviously goes infinite. If someone's not sure of how that works, Kiki-Jiki makes a copy of Restoration Angel. The Restoration Angel enters the battlefield, blinks the Kiki-Jiki, so Kiki-Jiki comes back into play, is untapped, has haste, and can put another copy of Restoration Angel into play. Every time you get a copy of Restoration Angel, it comes in as a 3/4 flyer, obviously, with haste, and you attack for infinite. It gets around a few things. You can't actually copy Spellskite, so if your opponent's got a Spellskite, it gets past that. Restoration Angel, obviously quite hard to remove. And it's actually really difficult to disrupt once it's on board, because you can't really respond to it at any point than when the Kiki-Jiki is tapped. So interacting with it is not the easiest thing in the world. And you have to really place yourself. We're back on the Desolate Lighthouse plus Celestial Colonnade plan. Celestial Colonnade, obviously the card that brings all these decks together, and one of the really good reasons to play this archetype. It's just insane. 4/4 Vigilance Flyer. I mean, you attack with it twice, and then your bolts and your helixes and your electrolyzers will finish the game from there. Yeah, and a repeal. I really like this card at the moment. People end up playing, stuff that you just want to remove, or at least have another shot at removing. And this is fine for 3 on a Tarmogoyf. It's really good for 1 on a token. Just paying 1 blue and bouncing a token forever. And what we're trying to do with this deck is we're trying to win in a really, really just a fair way, even though there's got this unfair option. Yeah, Kiki-Jiki plus Snapcaster is just a win condition on itself as well. Being able to buy back all your spells every turn. I know I already mentioned that, but I think that's one of the reasons that I really don't like Wall of Omens at the moment, is that Snapcaster Mage fills that role completely fine, and you already want to run it because the card's mental. I really don't think people should be running Wall of Omens, but that's neither here nor there. Make up your own mind on that. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. I might do some games later, but this is what we're looking at when we're looking at blue, white, and red. Those are some of the options that we can go through, and some of the ways that we can take the archetype. If anyone's got any questions about it, I'm very happy to give my 2 cents on it. Obviously, there's a lot of really good blue, white, red players out there, and you can talk to any of them about it. But it's an archetype I have some success with, and it's where I naturally gravitate towards in Modern because it's so fairly unfair. So we're really good at disrupting pretty much everyone, and when we win, we're going to do so in a really reliable and non-interactive way, which is bolt, 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 attack your colonnade. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.